Yeah, hi, a very good morning to you all, and thank you, Professor Lee. I will be just talking through with you with respect to the inclusive and equitable quality higher education enabled by digital technologies. But from there, I'm going to move on to some of the key initiatives that I have been involved in with respect to the capacity building of the higher education workforce. Right, I am chirping, you can call me Chirp, right? Chirp as in chirp, birds chirping, right? It is like a nickname since I was 10. If you introduce me by chirping, nobody would know chirping. Chirp is fine, right? Just like a couple of the speakers yesterday, I'm a Singaporean. I am based in Hong Kong, right? As what Professor Lee said, I'm a chair professor in the Education University of Hong Kong. I've got a colleague here as well who will be speaking in the afternoon, and I am a visiting professor and the chief expert in UNESCO ICH, which is based in Shenzhen. Right, I'll be just going through with you about how digital technology, so when we are looking at inclusive and equitable quality higher education and lifelong learning for all, I think we'll be looking at the issues of equity, quality, and efficiency. Right, from there I will be moving on to some of the rethinking and the emergence of generative AI, right, in terms of trying to rethink the role of AI in higher education. Right, and looking then into the impacts on higher education with respect to teaching, learning, and assessment, right? And then talking about the institutional response before I share with you two case studies. One would be a World Bank loan to the Cambodian government on higher education improvement, right? Looking at the capacity building of higher education workforce. And the other one would be looking at the case study of UNESCO ICH that is looking into the capacity building of the higher education workforce, not just in the region, right, but basically all around the world, right? So this is what I'll be going through. Right, so when we are looking at SDG 4, I think it is quite clear that it is probably always about quality, equity, and efficiency, right? And it's always about thinking through strategies and initiatives to be able to address that, right? In the education research itself, I would say that quite a lot of the focus would always be on quality, right? In terms of student learning engagement and student learning outcomes, right? But the thing is, we are aware that the equity is a critical part as well. So it's not just trying to be able to provide access, right, but to be able to provide the support in order to be able to access quality higher education teaching and learning, right? And of course, the part that we often do not pay much attention to, which is very much, again, part of SDG 4, right, especially with respect to lifelong learning. So it's about being able to have students who graduate from our institutions to be able to learn for life, right? That would be very much about external efficiency. But of course, efficiency itself would have internal efficiency with respect to cost effectiveness in terms of input and output, right? But I think for this session, efficiency would refer very much to lifelong learning, which is quite aligned to the theme of this particular conference, right? And I think the whole notion of equity and quality and efficiency, became a more urgent issue, especially during the pandemic, right? So with school closure, university closures, and the different issues that we are facing, so it's not just about the access to the infrastructure, devices, and resources, right? But also about ensuring that there is quality online and remote teaching and learning, right? So even if there is access to devices and infrastructure, right, the students may not receive the support to be able to engage in the learning the teachers may not be able, or the teachers may not have that capacity, right, to be able to develop quality resources, right, or they may not be able to conduct a quality online teaching and learning, or create a quality online teaching and learning environment. And of course, the whole rethinking about the modes of assessment, not just in terms of the summative assessment of the examinations, right, but also like rethinking of how we could be doing like something that is more formative in nature, something that is about portfolios, rather than the end of the semester examinations or the end of the academic year examinations, right? And of course, that rethinking about the curriculum as well as industries shift, there are emerging industries, right? And the demands from the industry and the future shape of the workforce. So, it's like all these different issues that got to be addressed, or they're actually, what's there, right? But it actually became more pertinent. Right, so I would be talking through with you quickly how some of these technologies that we have been working with over the years, right, are able to address some of those quality, equity, and efficiency issues. Right, so I actually changed the resolution of my slides from the experience of the speakers yesterday. So I hope they're not okay. Yeah, it's good, right? Yeah. But that means I can sleep at 12 midnight. Yeah, so we talked quite a bit about blended online teaching and learning. It's something that we talk about especially a lot. More in the developed world where there is that access to infrastructure as well as the devices. Right, but in the developing country, emerging country context, at times we do not just look at blended online teaching and learning from the just purely quality perspective, right? So we will be looking at the so-called equity perspective as well. So let me just give you an example of a project that I was involved in that was funded by the IDRC from Canada as well as HEIs Foundation based in Singapore, right, looking into 3 universities in Cambodia, right, the RUPP, Royal University of Phnom Penh, which is the flagship university in Cambodia, right, and 2 provincial universities, Warren University as well as National University of Patagong, right. So we have got 2 provincial universities that always lack capacity with respect to the staff that they have, the teaching staff that they have in those universities. So when you go to RUPP, you see the top scholars there. Quite a lot of their PhDs have graduated from basically all over the world, from Japan right through to the US, to Europe, etc. Right, but when you go to the province, quite often they are pretty junior staff, usually below the age of 35, right? And usually they just have a master's degree, right? So we were actually thinking of ways of how could we actually try to bridge that quality gap, right, between the provincial university and the so-called the city flagship university. So we got the professors and the lecturers together to be working on a really basic course that serve actually quite a lot of the programs, especially in engineering and sciences, right? The C programming language, which is often taught using English language textbooks, right? In the provincial university, because there is a lack of communal textbooks or communal resources. So we got them together to start developing digital resources. So we were doing that development work both in Phnom Penh as well as in Patagong, right? And eventually we actually made these resources available to all 3 universities, working through with the teachers also the resources and building their capacity to be able to use that resources. Right, so again, it is a case of blended online teaching and learning, right? But I think the thinking is very much about how do we be able to address that quality gap between different universities, especially the city ones and the provincial ones, right? So there are probably like the other examples of like using technologies to ensure quality and equity as well. So this is an example that is being used in the dentistry like program, whereby you use AR and 3D printing in order to be able to create a higher quality learning experience for the students, right? This, by the case, is from Singapore, right? Based on one of the higher education research panel that I was in, that we were able to observe this. This again is from Singapore, right? So we are looking at a like chemical engineering course whereby they are using a single-use bioreactor that costs like between 6,000 to 10,000 USD. Quite often students have got to work together on that bioreactor, a very expensive affair because it's a single use, and eventually how we actually tap upon the VR in order to ensure that all students would have access to that practical learning experience. Right. There's like some more examples basically all over the world how the VR actually reach out to students. They may not have the access into higher education in terms of the physical access, right? So how, in this case, like looking at a technician course, how like VR was used as a way to be able to accommodate students that might be usually quite marginalized from the higher education process, right? So being able to use technologies to create that the quality learning experience for the students that may be from the marginalized groups, or that may be, or that might need to be working full time, right? And that may be quite far from the campus. Right, and as we move towards generative AI in the next section that we are talking about, I think when we look at the concept of AI, it has been around for the longest time, right? So a lot about diagnostic, a lot about feedback, right? A lot about personalized and adaptive teaching and learning, right? So intelligent tutoring system is definitely one, right? This is probably just an example from the UK, right, where we are looking at the open access AI-enabled like the writing tool that is able to allow students or to provide students with constructive feedback as they are working through a draft of their essay. Like really exciting, really personalized, really adaptive, but it is still about trying to equip the AI with as much intelligence as possible rather than the learners, right? So it's about AI, right? But that intelligence is with the AI, right? Right, being adaptive and being able to personalize the process in order to provide the feedback, right? This is another example of the AI as well, like very much to help students to manage their learning, right, in the university, where they are actually trying to look into the different administrative aspect of being a higher education student with respect to timetable, with respect to campus services, dorm services, etc. So a chatbot was actually developed in order to be able to support that, right? So how effective the AI is quite often depends on how powerful it is, how intelligent it is, being able to support the students. Right, so in the last, I would say, 10 to 12 months, right, so of course that is that emergence of ChatGPT that we all have been talking about quite a lot over the last, especially over the last 9 months, right, and I think the key question that we always have is we are aware that ChatGPT does empower our learners, right? But I think we do ask ourselves as educators and education leaders, right? Like, do our students really have that capacity to be able to carry out and manage the inquiries, right? As they are being empowered to use ChatGPT, right? So if they do not have the capacity, what competencies are needed from our students as they plan, organize, and personalize their learning process, right? When we talk about lifelong learning, it's not about just learning for life per se, right? It is very much about how do we monitor and manage learning, right? How do we identify where our learning gaps are, and then how do we then engage in learning about bridging that learning gap, right? So it's not about just learning for life, 24/7 learning, right? But it's very much about monitoring and managing the learning process. So do our students have that competency to be able to do that, right? So as we think, right, like unlike most of the EdTech tool that we are talking about, that may be quite instructor, university teacher driven, right, or very course driven, right? Like we do see the generative AI used within the education sector as very student driven, right? In terms of them monitoring, them receiving the feedback, acting upon the feedback, right? But of course, in a formal learning environment, right? Often you are always driven by a set of learning outcomes, right? A set of course outcomes, program outcomes. So again, how do you actually create assignments in such a way that the students would be motivated to engage in that learning process in order to meet the learning outcomes that is required by the assessment task, right? How do we scaffold that process, right? So there's quite a lot of the rethinking there. And when we talk about the learning analytics, you know, it's like there might be a shift as well. Not so much about the administrator or the teachers having access to that data, but again, the students being like able to have access to that data and be able to conduct an inquiry, right, about their learning process and about their learning outcomes, right? So you know, so we really look at the learning analytics for more personalized learning. I think quite a lot of you have spoken about the generative AI as a learning partner, real-time assistance, customized scaffolding and feedback. A lot of brainstorming, how it facilitates brainstorming, like within an individual, among individuals. How are we able to enhance the education access and resource for social justice, of course. Right, so I think the key question for us as educators would be how do we then create an environment, right, to take up the affordances, the opportunities, and to be able to address the limitations of ChatGPT, right, as an enabler for higher education, equity, quality, and efficiency. Right, this was not supposed to be here actually because, no, because I changed the whole, like, the inquiry. Okay, but that's fine. It should be the slide that I sent out at 12 midnight, not this set aside. No, but fine. It is, so this was not the inquiry that I wanted to make. I'll just like tell a story. On Christmas Eve, like last year, I met up with a bunch of EdTech people. Okay, don't ask me why am I meeting up with a bunch of EdTech people on Christmas Eve on a family holiday in South Korea after skiing for 1 week. Do not ask me that question. Right, so I was with this group of EdTech professors, a few of them from the World Bank, one who is a director in the ADB, the Asian Development Bank. We sat down for lunch. Okay, it's supposed to be an informal lunch, but I think due to some like occupational hazard, the question of EdTech came up. So he asked the question, hey, why is EdTech always a failure in the education sector? Right, so you know, so come on, you know, it's like probably on that table there would be probably 100 years of experience, right, in terms of EdTech implementation, right, at least 100 years of experience, and we came up with the most intelligent response, like what you probably would, you know, like, okay, because there's a lack of access of infrastructure, of resources. There is a lack of capacity in the schools in terms of teachers and in terms of the school leaders. There are issues of the curriculum. And we always like to blame high-stake examinations as well, especially in Northeast Asia, like Hong Kong, Shanghai, Southeast Asia to Singapore as well. It's like when we always blame the high-stake examinations because you see that the ball game of the ACTEC is so different from the ball game of high-stake examinations, right? Okay, fine. So we gave all those response. He went back home. He went into the beta version of the ChatGPT. Why is ACTEC always a failure? And he sent us the response of ChatGPT, and we doubted our self-worth. I have been an ACTEC professor probably for the last 22 years. So where have my 22 years gone? Yeah, great. Pretty depressing, right? No, but I thought it's just quite an interesting story that so you start to question a lot about teaching and learning. You start to question a lot about what then is my role as a higher education teacher, a higher education professor in the university, right? If those responses could easily be done by ChatGPT. Okay, of course it's not perfect, right? Yeah. Right, so when we start thinking about reconceptualizing, it is really not like so much about learning mediated by ChatGPT, right? So it is not the mediation, right, of teaching and learning with ChatGPT, right? But it is actually learning how to learn with ChatGPT, which I thought is very much in line with what we are doing in lifelong learning, right? So how do we really learn to learn with ChatGPT? So do students and professors know how to learn? And how do we scaffold that learning process? And you could see that learning curve as well is really interesting. The impacts on higher education teaching and learning assessment, I'll just zoom through this quite quickly. Right, think when we are looking at generative AI in higher education, right, we are aware of what the opportunities are in terms of the adaptation, in terms of how automatic it is with respect to the immediate and continuous feedback, a conversation that you could engage with, right, much better than most human beings, right? And of course, the advanced part in terms of the sophistication that it actually brings into the inquiry process, being able to analyze students' responses and being able to assess problem-solving strategies, right? But the thing is, we are aware of the threats as well, the limitations, right? And the thing is, when ChatGPT first came out, I think there quite a lot of top universities around the world, including two that I show you here from France and also from from Hong Kong, right? They actually banned the use of ChatGPT. This is not my next slide because the one that I sent at midnight had this really cool inquiry, right? About why do universities ban ChatGPT, right? And the thing is, it's like I should not even be here giving a keynote because you could just go into ChatGPT and they'll tell you why do universities ban it, right? And you probably know why from academic integrity, right through to the difficulties of assessing students, the authenticity, etc. Right, but it points to one clearly important thing about the rethinking of assessment practices, that we really need to start rethinking about how do we create assessment tasks. How then do we design teaching and learning processes in order to be able to scaffold the students in completing that assessment task, whether individually or in groups, right? So, especially in the last 3 months, we have been seeing more and more universities, right, coming up with guidelines that are trying to scaffold their teachers and scaffold their students in order to rethink some of these teaching and learning and assessment practices. This case here is by the University of North Carolina. right? And at the same time, they are also rethinking about the curriculum. How do we transform the curriculum in such a way that it's not just about integrating AI, right, into some of the programs, right, but also to be able to tease out that AI literacy, right? For those of you who have gone to the digital learning week in Paris, right, you would have come across quite a lot of those AI literacy that are actually required by students and by teachers, right? So again, basically all across the world, from the northwest right up to, if you call like Auckland southeast, but it's not really southeast, it's just somewhere in the middle of the ocean, right? It's like that transformation in the curriculum framework, in rethinking about what is the landscape, what is the higher education landscape like when you bring in generative AI. Right, so and in the last 3 months again, you are beginning to see very intelligent the institutional response, right, to generative AI with respect to policy. This is from the U of Toronto, right, in terms of policies, being able to articulate where their vision is with respect to how AI could be used and how generative AI is being situated in teaching and learning, right? There are capacity building that is being done for the staff, right? And the thing is, this is not just in the U of actually Toronto. It cuts across many like universities in the West or in the East, running workshops, creating guidelines, providing resources, and I think what is key in providing that support as well, right? And also looking at the students, providing that student support, right? Not through the band and through coming out with I was actually asking like why there are really well-dressed like ladies around. Okay, not that the rest of the ladies here are not well-dressed, but maybe better dressed, right? Or more traditionally dressed, like what their roles are, and is to show me that my time is almost up. Yeah. Right, so besides for capacity building, there is that student support as well. Right, this is policies from my university. Again, you could see it across the universities in the last 3 months, capacity building, student support. Right, and the thing is, you could see that institutional responses from a very holistic perspective. Right, but what I would like to be focusing on right now is the capacity building of the higher education teachers and leaders. So I'll probably ask the chair if I can have 2 more minutes. 对不起，李明教授，我再需要2分钟 ，OK 吗 ？Okay, good. Yeah. 2 more minutes, all right? Okay, fantastic. Right, so this one is the first case study that I wanted to share with you that is actually a loan to the Cambodian government by the World Bank. My university working with 6 other universities, with the key university being the Royal University of Phnom Penh, to actually set up a center of excellence in higher education, teaching and learning innovations to be able to build the capacity of the higher education workforce. Right, so this is the, actually the midnight version is a bit better because, but you can see the gist of it. It's like how we use technologies to enable that teacher professional development at scale, right? So not just for the teachers in the city, but also the teachers in the province that is 6 hours by car from Phnom Penh, like providing them with their professional development opportunities, working with the master teachers, right, over a 6 months period, build their capacity, and then using the resources that we have developed and setting up different professional learning community within the university, within faculties, across programs, right? So like really building resources, giving them access to different learning resources, localizing those resources. I think it is quite critical that when we are looking at trying to achieve scale, that we are always have the mindset of being able to design for scale and being able to be inclusive by localizing, right? That's really critical, right? The impact, we have been working on it for the last 1.5 years. By June 2024, we hope that we'll hit at least 1,000 teachers across 6 universities and 30,000 students across all 6 universities. And in the higher education improvement, part 2, right, we would be actually be scaling up to all 103 universities in Cambodia. Right, next I'll just talk through quickly the UNESCO IG work. It was something that was started out in 2019. Right, in 2018 we have a lot of co-consultation with our partners, right, and then there's a co-construction in terms of thinking through what should we exactly be doing and to be able to draw upon the basic principles of mutual benefits by that co-contribution to that process. Right, so it's very much aligned to, of course, the Futures of Education and the Education 2030 framework. Right, I think we started in 2019 December, right, through the pandemic, we have now about 91 partners all across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, 34 countries, some like HEIs from China. And I think what is critical is we have actually just started the IIOE national centers, right, in Egypt, in Malaysia, etc., in order to be able to scale up the capacity building, right? And IIOE, there is a platform that could be accessible by our partners, right? First launched in April 2020, right? The hard launch was then, right? And then after that, another launch like recently in 2023, right? So it is a learning management system that actually supports 6 languages. We have got about 12,000 users. Given that the new version is just launched in 130 countries. So the IIOE is not just a platform, it's actually an ecosystem and is an alliance that we are trying to be able to build, right, by UNESCO IG, right? So to be actually, as I said, to be able to design for scale, right, and then getting our IIOE National Center to be able to localize the resources, localize the strategies, localize the examples, localize the sharing, localize the mentoring, right, at the national level with their partners, right? So some of our IIOE National Center have been operating for more than 6 months now, right? And you could actually see that impact, right, like across the different IIOE National Center. Right, so this is probably some of the impacts that we were actually able to make during the pandemic to be able to support the teaching staff in terms of how do we engage in remote and online teaching and learning, right? So like to be able to provide them with the support as they are caught in the pandemic with university closure, right? And what we are working right through on right now with UNESCO office in Bangkok, the Asia Pac office is on micro-credentials and also working with our partners on that, right? And trying to align that micro-credentials to the competency framework for the higher education workforce, right? So on top of that, I think we are also, we have been doing the infrastructure bit about the smart classroom and the AI labs, etc., across universities and across the IIOE National Center. And this is what we are trying to do moving forward, right? As I said, in scaling up, but like keeping in mind that for inclusiveness and equitable quality, we need to be doing a lot of localization, working with our partners. So a lot about back to the whole notion of partnerships, back to the whole notion of research evaluation, providing evidences, right, about capacity building, about providing students learning support, etc. So I would like to thank you. Yeah, it's still the old cool picture, right, because my colleague said I should keep this. But in the new version, the midnight version, there's a really nice picture of me. This was actually a 25-year-old me, so thank you.
谢刚才Cher的精彩演讲啊，缺点就是超时了。这个他谈的数字技术与高等教育的融合的一些案例，对当前生成式人工智能的一些思考啊，和介绍了 IOE 的一些全球运作情况。我想他谈的这些话题是当前我们在座的各位专家和同行所十分关注的热点。我想请2位重量级嘉宾啊上台来就他所谈论的话题啊进行讨论。第一位是国际开放和远程教育理事会秘书长托伦女士，有请。第2位是联合国教科文组织拉美及加勒比地区高等教育国际研究所的所长佩德罗先生，有请。刚才Cher讲了这么多内容，我相信你们2位也都是这方面十分关注并且有研究的。我注意到大家在各自的机构都对这些问题做了很多的探讨，并且有很多实践的案例。请你们2位分别就你们关注的问题向Cher提出来，我们做一些讨论。先请。
Thank you very much, Moderator. And I would like to start thanking Professor Lim for a very inspiring keynote. Gave many concrete examples on how technology-enhanced education and AI can improve quality and efficiency. And in particular, how the learning experience can be more personalized, how tutoring and feedback can improve, but also practical and administrative support that we know students are often in need of. You asked some questions when you moved over to how generative AI specifically is designed to generate new content, what it would require of new competencies from students in particular. And I think it was interesting, this shift you mentioned, learning to use ChatGPT and moving on to learning to learn with ChatGPT. And I think one core competency that students would need is prompting. It's really to ask the good questions. So it goes back to the Socratic methodology. We should all be familiar with that. But that it turns out now it's already, you can take courses in prompting ChatGPT and other generative AI tools. Because we know that we will get more out of it if we are able to ask good questions and build on the knowledge that we already have. And then you ask the question about how we as leaders and teachers could facilitate ChatGPT in education and other generative AI tools in education with respect to quality, equity, and efficiency. And I think you also gave some good examples from institutional policies that I absolutely approve of. We need to relate to this technology. It's there. We cannot pretend it's not there. We have to relate to it and we have to be involved with it. And it means in leadership and capacity building. I recently attended a roundtable for vice chancellors in the Commonwealth learning countries, and we discussed the topic there as well. And one of the vice chancellors said that, you know, we just need to ensure that we bend it, the AI, according to our will. So it's something about also controlling the technologies. And I'll get back to this because I think this triangle that you presented with quality, efficiency, and equity is a really good compass to navigate after. And you talked a lot about and demonstrated how AI can provide quality and efficiency. Now, the equity side of it is where I'm more concerned, because we have to take into account that as with all other technologies, they can provide increased access to education and learning. But they can also, because of existing inequalities, they can also exacerbate these inequalities. So the people who are excluded from the technologies will be even more set back. So that's one concern. And another concern is that AI can reinforce the biases that exist. Because we know that the ones who invest in these new technologies are privileged. It's large corporations and majority populations and majority languages and cultures. So this is also a concern in addition to the ownership of data, privacy protection, and the whole ethical perspective. Because we have to take into account that machines, these machines that learn, they are trained by humans. So they would reproduce our own biases. And I came to think of this when I recently met a researcher, an expert and professor from Egypt, and she's an expert in AI. She uses AI a lot in her teaching and her research. And she had asked ChatGPT about a feminist reading of the Quran. And ChatGPT answered that they prefer not to do this interpretation. And so we need to, if we want to make sure to maintain academic integrity, we should also train and teach our students to ask critical analytical questions. And if ChatGPT points out things like this, we should be able to discuss with them and challenge this. So I think, I'm guessing what I'm saying is that it's a collective responsibility to control AI, to ensure that we also focus on this equity side, the academic integrity, and the whole social justice perspective of education and system. Thank you.
Do you want me to respond first, or I think there's no real response. It is quite critical that as we are engaged in higher education, teaching and learning innovations, right, that we are being aware that there are always issues of equity, quality, and efficiency that we are dealing with, right? So as an innovation actually comes into this ecosystem, how then do we address that, right? And as what you have actually highlighted, the generative AI, in a way, it is still something that is created by human beings from a particular background, from a particular socio-economic group, maybe the less marginalized, like maybe the people from the less marginalized communities, maybe even, right? So again, like the way it learns may favor one group over other groups, and that is probably like something that we need to be aware of. So again, it's not what the AI could do in terms of how could we make them more how could we make them more intelligent so that they will be equitable? Don't think you really need intelligence to be equitable, do you? No? Right, but I think for us as policymakers and educators, it's like, what could we do, right? Like how could we be creating an environment within our classroom, if we are classroom teachers, within our university, if we are university presidents, or within our higher education ecosystem, right, in such a way that we are able to address some of these biases, right, which is really, really critical. Something that we often take it for granted. So, I think in the formal higher education teaching and learning, right, there is always that institutional outcomes that actually need to be made, that then would inform all the different program outcomes and eventually their course outcomes, right? So again, rethinking what do we want out of our students, right? How then could programs be say revised and refined in such a way that we are able to take into consideration some of those issues that you have actually highlighted, and eventually how could we do at a course level? Because quite often quite a lot of this work is being done at the grassroots level, but of course with the support, right, of policies, with the support of the existing organizational structure of the university. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It was really a pleasure learning from your presentation. I think that we all want to ask the organizers to provide us with the midnight version of your presentation. So the first thing is first. And then I have to confess as well that I'm a bit scared because I feel, well, actually I have to say that before midnight I used your prior version, the one that we have seen, and I requested ChatGPT to provide me with comments. Okay. I'm not going to use it. But I'm really scared because I think that this is going to be the last time I'm commenting here, because next time we will have an app, you know, doing this. Anyway, let me provide you with some reflections based on the, I would say, the perspective of Latin America and the Caribbean. First of all, maybe I'm going to just, because of time, I'm going to focus on just on three things. One is that I think that you would have probably a better rationale if you started by presenting first what are the needs of higher education systems. Because my feeling is that this perspective always tells us things about what we can actually do with new developments. But it is sometimes pretty much disconnected from the reality of the perception of needs and actual possibilities of our system. Let me give you an example, just rough data coming from Latin America. We have a participation rate of less than 25%, and that means that out of every 4 youth that graduate from senior high school, only 1 gets access to higher education. But of those who get access, less than half will ever graduate. And on top of that, the likelihood of getting access to higher education is pretty much connected with the socioeconomic status of your family, up to the fact that, you know, depending on where you are located in the scale of socioeconomic status, the likelihood of accessing higher education could be not double, triple, or 4 times, 7 times higher. So, frankly, we have an issue when it comes to equity. You mentioned that at the beginning, but I think that the question for us is to what extent these technological developments will help us address those, in a way, needs of our system. That's the first thing. The second point I wanted to make is that we, at our institute, with the support of HEI, by the way, which I would like to refer to because it has been really critical in that respect, we have been analyzing to what extent the COVID represented an opportunity for the transformation of the delivery of higher education in Latin America. And the results are somehow mild. On the one hand, when we ask students about whether their perspectives about how teaching has evolved have changed, we have half of them saying that you know, there has been an impact, so now they feel that they are being taught differently as before the pandemic, but half of them say that it's far worse than it used to be. So that probably means that the effects of an intense use of technology, at least in Latin American universities, have been, in a way, depending on the actual capacities of institutions and teachers in particular to use the window of opportunity properly. Okay. So there is an issue of capacity development, which you rightly pointed out in your presentation. Now, when it comes to the use of generative artificial intelligence, I have to say that we all know, and that's in the upcoming report that we're going to present in Shenzhen, everything going well in December. We have data showing that 80% of higher education students in Latin America, 80% have already been using some kind of ChatGPT related applications, for good or bad, that we don't know, of course. But, you know, 80%, while the equivalent figure for teachers is less than 10%. Okay? So hardly you can talk, you can engage in a conversation about the possibilities of generative AI with teachers who never experience or would not ever feel the need to experience with generative AI. And so, frankly, we have an issue when it comes to capacity development of teachers. And the examples that you have provided from universities in Asia, in North America, can hardly be replicated in Latin America, where we are missing certainly capacity development centers for teachers in higher education. Moreover, I would like to say that Latin America, when it comes to this, is quite conservative. We still have a mindset according to which you are going to become an excellent higher education teacher or professor simply because you have been publishing in a number of international journals. And frankly, this is far from being true, right? So I think that we are still, in Latin America at least, in the framework of that mindset, and we need to change that. And finally, my very last point is about the policy environment, which I think that is something that I would like to learn from you. I mean, to what extent you think that policies that have been, for instance, in the last probably 2 or 3 years, trying to address issues that are extremely important for the delivery of 21st century higher education, like internet poverty, but are not in the hands of higher education institutions, are critical in that respect. I think that, once again, providing you with some data coming from Latin America, less than 5% of Latin American homes have the technological capacity to follow an event like this from home. Less than 5%. And I would say even more, when it comes to lifelong learning, only in the best case scenario, 15% of the adult population have the digital competencies that would allow them to engage in distance education in the modern era coming from universities. So that's the reality that we have in Latin America. So I'd like very much to hear from you, how do you think that government should address, first of all, issues like internet poverty, and then how governments can help higher education institutions to see in lifelong learning opportunities more than a market niche, because that's the way in which we look at that in Latin America, as a market opportunity. Universities are really desperate in finding additional sources of funding, so they look at lifelong learning as a market, and they go with really aggressive offers, just trying to get the funding that under normal circumstances they would expect to get from governments, for instance. So that we need to change, and I would like to know if you can provide us with examples of the way in which governments can help turn around this perspective that could help higher education institutions to reframe their mission in the wider context of the lifelong learning engagement. That's all. Once again, thank you very much. It was really, really a very inspiring presentation. Thank you.
2分钟的回答，我们还有3分钟。
Okay, thanks. Think you are probably like going back to the so-called the philosophical question of also what is the end of higher education, right? It's like the end, as in it could be the end or it could be the end, right? So from the observations that we have working with universities in emerging and developing countries in the region, I think there is that like mindset that universities are more pragmatic in their dealings in terms of the way programs are being developed or designed and developed, right? And quite often, just for example, in Cambodia, the basic question is, it's like, where would our graduates go after they leave the university, and would they be taking up a higher salary package than those who have not gone through it? So again, it is very much about how do they then align their curriculum to the industry. So quite a lot of stakeholders' engagement, from what I observe, have been very much on the industry engagement, right? So bringing back alumni, bringing back recent graduates in the industries talking with industry's partners, and trying to have a larger component of industry attachment, right? So what you have said is really pertinent, but again, there's always the issue of, yes, it may be something that government can do a bit more, just like in Cambodia, what the Director General of Higher Education could be doing a bit more, right? But the thing is, could you really measure, inverted commas, lifelong learning and certain competencies? It's not that I do not believe in it, but I would say that at times when you deal with universities, university rectors in some of these countries, there's always that constant struggle. They are aware, right? They are aware that students should be empowered, right? That they should be able to monitor and manage their own the learning. But they are also aware that these students eventually will go to the industries, and industries usually want it quick, fast, and dirty, right? It's like they don't believe that, oh, we should be investing another 3 years in these people, right? To ensure that they are able to work at a certain capacity within our company. So, which is a constant tension that we have. So, no answer. I'm sorry. Yeah, but I try my best. Thank you.
我们这个环节啊，Cher托伦女士和佩德罗先生发表了一些重要的演讲和意见。我相信就这个热点，在座的各位都还有很多想讨论和提出的问题。我想在我们会议接下来的时间，大家可以利用会外再做深入讨论。我们为了使得数字化与高等教育融合，我所在的中心和全球教科文的各地区机构和一些专业研究机构，正在开展10份数字化的现状实践案例和下一步我们努力的方向这样一些研究，包括佩德罗所在的拉美一类所，我们也在开展一个拉美地区的研究。我们试图通过这样一些研究，深入了解在不同地区、不同国家，在数字化进程当中都遇到了一些什么问题，软件、硬件、人才、能力。所以我想我们这个问题还在进行中没有什么现成的结论，有成功的案例，也有我们需要在实践当中摸索、研究和解决的问题。我们这个环节由于时间问题，时间到了，就感谢3位精彩的演讲和言论。这个阶段我们就结束了，谢谢各位。
谢谢。